Good morning. I have some announcements for you this morning. They're printed on the back of your order of service, of course, and that's for people who read. But for those people who don't read or who are oral learners, I recall my wife giving me some instruction on teaching some years ago, and she said, people learn 3 different ways. And I said, oh. And she said, yes, people learn by doing. That's the John, what's his name, from the early 20th century, the famous teacher. Dewey, thank you very much. Yeah, not the presidential candidate, but John Dewey, who said that people learn by doing. And then she said people learn by seeing or reading, right? And then people learn by hearing. And so ideally, you want to do all 3 of those things, right? So that's why we put the slides up on the screen so you can see them, but we also read these, and then you can take them home with you and put them on your refrigerator with the magnet, so you know where it goes. Okay. The Navajo textiles are still on display, and they will be through, let's see.
November 26th.
Thank you, November 26th. It's a beautiful display, by the way. And the fellow who was presenting those talked to my wife, who was one of the docents, and explained them in detail. And it's just an amazing collection. So I hope you get a chance to see those. There is a Thanksgiving potluck. It's on November 23rd at 1 p.m. in the RE Great Room. And you should contact Jan Thompson if you're planning on going. You must contact Jan Thompson. Jan, why don't you stand up so everyone can see you, so you can contact Jan. There we go. I'll be giving her another plaudit in just a moment. There's also a religious education donation drive, and they're starting this because they did this last year. What they want to do is coordinate contributions aimed at supporting Project Link Homelessness Education Program. This is a program aimed at assisting homeless Las Cruces public school students and their families by providing support through donation of basic needs. And there's a whole list of those on the thing. Finally, 15 minutes after the service, Jan Thompson will be conducting a discussion, or will be leading a discussion, of the proposed changes to the UU bylaws. And those changes are primarily on the principles, right? Yeah, a restatement of the principles, as it were. So if you're interested in that, 15 minutes after our service today, Jan will be here leading a discussion about that. All right? Did I miss any other announcements? No? All righty.
Our gathering song is familiar, I think. Don't forget that I've changed the order of the words. If you're looking in the hymnal, it says, "Enter, rejoice, and come in," which seems kind of backwards. Like maybe you have to go back out to come back in. So I invite you to sing it as it's printed, and it will be on the screen. Enter, come in, and rejoice. Okay? I am obviously from this wonderful bright red t-shirt, and Jan's the only one that got the memo about red. There you go. The original creator of this song, Betty Wilder, I've adopted her even if she wasn't an official Unitarian or Universalist. Make sense? All right, in that case, stand up and let's sing this song.
And a good morning again. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces. We welcome those of you who are in the sanctuary, of course, and those of you who are joining us on streaming technology. I'm Charlie Scholz, your service associate today. Our service leader, of course, is Reverend Rod Thompson. Our special music today is provided by Nancy and David Carlson. And you haven't even heard David play yet. My goodness. Well, I can't imagine what'll happen. Assisting us today are Elwin Nunn on camera, Claire Wallace on audio, and Mike Yazko on streaming technology. And our greeters today are Linda Ruscella and Ed Long. Okay? Hospitality today is offered by the membership committee, and I'll make a note of that right at the end here. I beg your pardon? It's by Finance Committee. Well, somebody gave me the wrong information. Okay, so it's going to be a richer hospitality, obviously. Okay, make that note, and I'll put yum yum down beside it. Okay, good. We're all delighted to be with you today. We like to say that Unitarian Universalism has no creed or dogma, and I'm always reminded of that bumper sticker I saw many years ago. It said, "My karma ran over your dogma." You may remember that. That was popular in the 80s, I think. Okay, we're a covenant-based church, meaning that we agree to live in relationship with one another according to the Unitarian Universalist principles and our congregation's covenant of right relations. We embrace diversity in all its forms. Everyone is welcome here. You can learn more about our church at our website, uuuclc.org. Now, if you're visiting today, we'd like to meet you. If you're in the sanctuary, please rise in body or spirit, and wait until I bring you the mic, but I'd like you to tell us where you're from and what your name is. Do we have any visitors today? There's one. I don't think of you as a visitor, Bev, but yes.
I'm a long-time relapse visitor or something. Anyway, Beverly Pirtle, and I live here in Las Cruces. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a while. Thank you.
Nice to see you again. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, I'm Carol Cassavant. I just came 8 weeks ago from Moscow, Idaho. Well, outside of Moscow, Idaho. And glad to be in New Mexico from Idaho.
It's nice to have you here. Anyone else? All righty then. Now, if you were a shy visitor and didn't fill out a visitor card, be sure and do that so we can invite you to other things. And if you're streaming, you can always put something online and send us your email so we can get in contact with you. Please join us after the service down the way through the breezeway there for coffee and conversations inside, I assume, and outside the RE building. All right? Our chalice lighting words today are from Christine Robinson. Reverend Christine Robinson was at the Albuquerque Church for many years, and she has preached here, as a matter of fact. Wonderful, wonderful lady. She writes, "We gather this hour as people of faith. With joys and sorrows, gifts and needs, we light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together."
We have traveled country roads, highways, city streets to come together here this morning. We each bring a different history, but we share this common moment. We bring the scars of living, a record of our hurts, and the proof of our healing. Let us celebrate the beauty that makes the shattered whole. Welcome to our celebration of life. I invite you now to stand up again embody your spirit to join in reading together our covenant and then singing the doxology in English and in Spanish. Love is the doctrine of this church. Quest to truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To go together in peace, seek knowledge in freedom, second ours in unity, in that all souls shall grow to glorification. Thus do we covenant with one another. Now you can sit back down again. This is exercise in exercise today. I elected, since I was focusing on Unitarian Universalist personnel, I offered to do the Time for All Ages, and we have no kids here today. Well, all of us are kids at heart, I think, but anyway. I assume that many of you know the name Robert Fulghum. Yeah? Okay. If you don't, you at least know one of his writings. Robert Fulghum is a colleague of mine and a generation ahead of me, and one of my heroes. I have at least 5 of his books, which are made up primarily of his newsletter postings. So, for those of you who don't know Fulghum, he preferred to go just by Fulghum. If you don't know, he had been a working cowboy, a folk singer, an IBM salesman, a professional artist, a parish minister. He was one of our churches in the Seattle area, a bartender, a teacher of drawing and painting, and a father. He writes that every spring, and I'm not sure why in the spring, but every spring he would try to write a credo, his statement of faith. And early on, he says it got to be that it looked like a Supreme Court brief, trying to make every word do the job. But anyway, later on, he decided he would write one that was just 1 page. And for those of you familiar with this, you'll recognize it almost immediately. Here is his credo. All I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sandpile in Sunday school. These are the things I learned. Share everything. Play fair. Don't hit people. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your own mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. Wash your hands before you eat. Flush. Warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. Live a balanced life. Learn some and think some and draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day some. Take a nap every afternoon. Yes. When you go out in the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands, and stick together. Be aware of wonder. Remember the little seed in the styrofoam cup? The roots go down and the plant grows up, and nobody really knows how or why. But we are all like that. Goldfish and hamsters and white mice and even the little seed in the styrofoam cup, they all die. And so do we. And then remember the Dick and Jane books, the first word you learned, the biggest word of all, look. Everything you need to know is in there somewhere. The golden rule and love and basic sanitation, ecology and politics and equality and sane living. Take any one of those items and Thank you. Sometimes the tongue doesn't work. Extrapolate it into sophisticated adult terms and apply it to your family life, your work, your government, your world, and it holds true and clear and firm. Think what a better world it would all be. The whole world had cookies and milk at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and then took a nap with our blankies. Or if all governments had a basic policy to always put things back where they found them and to clean up their own mess. And it is still true, no matter how old you are, when you go out into the world, it's best to hold hands and stick together. You get to stand up again if you are able and willing. We're not going to sing the children's out because there aren't any children. So we're going to go right to the hymn. I was supposed to say, because it said so in my notes, that was Carolyn McDade's song. She was not officially a Unitarian or Universalist, but she was in our churches an awful lot.
Absolutely, yes.
Now it's your turn.
Thank you. I was going to mention, since I was thinking I was going to introduce that song, but Rod jumped in front of me here. So this is the song that the choir sings to itself at the beginning of every rehearsal session. And it's a wonderful song, and we hold hands, and because the choir, you know, is a covenant group. Our leader, of course, is Catherine Massey, and it's just a wonderful experience. You know, it just brings us together, and I really love that song. All righty, and I lost my book. Ah, here we go. One of the ways we support each other, of course, in our congregation here is through the sharing of joys, sorrows, and milestones. And in these challenging times, it's crucial that we make attempts to stay connected to one another. So if you have a joy, a sorrow, or a milestone that you'd like to share with the congregation this morning, please raise your hand. I'll bring you the mic. State your name and what is in your heart. Before we do that, though, I want to share a couple of joys with you, and I'll turn on the mic here. I don't know if you're a football fan, but I understand that NMSU actually beat Auburn in a game yesterday. Someone said they brought, what did they, Mike, you told me how much this was. They paid our team $1.8 million to come to Auburn, and they beat the pants off of Auburn 31-10. I'm not a football fan. I haven't followed the NMSU team ever, I guess, but that's an amazing accomplishment, and I would say that's a joy, certainly. I beg your pardon?
They'll be in the conference championship.
They'll be in the conference championship now? Holy cow. All right, that's good. The other joy I have is that tomorrow my wife and I will celebrate 47 years of wedded bliss. She's not here this morning. I don't know what that means exactly, but... All right, do you have a joy, sorrow? I saw a hand right here.
I have a sorrow this morning. The last sister of my mother, and her generation, passed on this week at 101. Yeah.
Thank you, Jerry. I saw a hand over here. Yes.
I'm Nancy Carlson, and I have a mixed blessing to share today. The great joy is that after more than 20 years in Anchorage, Alaska, our daughter Margot and her husband Andy Sorum decided they needed to live further south. So, since mid-October, they are now Las Cruces residents and are across the street neighbors. The sad part of this is that Margot had agreed to play with her father today to do some duets. And yesterday she came down with a bad head cold and said, I can't do it. So we quickly looked in our repertoire and picked a couple easy things. And for the anthem, we are going to be playing When I Am Laid in Earth by Henry Purcell. And our offertory music will be La Cinquantaine by Gabrielle Marie.
Okay, well, those are joys, I think. All right, I see another hand.
Thank you. My name is Jan Thompson, and there are many ways in which we support one another. Last week, well, a little over a week, the transmission went out on my little Civic hybrid vehicle, a 2013, and they wanted $6,000 to repair it. And I wasn't sure if I should invest in that or look for another car. And so I consulted with a lot of people here at church. And I got some really good suggestions and advice. And I have purchased a Kia Niro plug-in hybrid, runway red. And I'm happy.
It's my favorite automobile color. It's, I've had 3 of those already. Other joys? Yes, sir.
My name is Haney. I not sure what this is. For the last close to 50 years, Lynn and I have had huge Thanksgivings, so much to the point that the boys didn't think she could cook for less than 17. But out here with our church grandchildren's mother and the other church grandmother, things were getting complicated. I mean, really complicated. One can't eat mushrooms. One would just keel over if you fed her anything with corn, including okay. My son has gone to a vegetarian. And so, I'm 81, and so I'm not brining a turkey. I'm not going to smoke fish for the vegetarian he's a pescatarian. We're just going to have a vegetarian Thanksgiving. And frankly, oh, no. Oh, no. For a black man reared in Southern Virginia, no. Not one hunk of meat or anything. No fat back.
Thank you, Andy. Anyone else? Yes, Robert.
I lost a friend of 40 years a couple weeks ago. And I remember when I met her, she was the mother of my good friend that I live with. And she would be out on the porch reading and chain smoking. And I'm thinking, boy, she doesn't have much life left. And she lived for another 40 years, and she became a very close friend of mine. She lived into her 80s. So I'm going to miss her terribly.
Thank you, Robert. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to light one more candle for all the joys and sorrows that have been expressed, and also for those that you've kept in your heart.
My reading this morning was written by Willard Frank, a Unitarian Universalist. It's entitled, "Their Fates Were Linked." The fates of individuals are at times linked in curious ways. Consider the lives of 3 Unitarians, Charles and Eliza Follen, and that's spelled Follen, and Nathaniel Currier. Charles T.C. Follen, an abolitionist and courageous advocate for freedom, who is credited with bringing the Christmas tree to the United States, served as a Unitarian minister in New York City until 1838, and afterward remained in that city awaiting a new pulpit. In 1839, the East Lexington, Massachusetts Unitarian Church, which Follen had helped to found in 1835, was preparing to dedicate its new building, and Follen was asked to officiate. His wife, Eliza Cabot Follen, was ill and not up to making the trip from New York to Massachusetts. Follen asked that the ceremony be postponed. He didn't wish to leave his wife in her condition. But the East Lexington Church was eager to proceed with its long-planned dedication, so Fallen very reluctantly decided to make the trip by himself. Fallen boarded the steamship Lexington for Boston on September 13th, 1840. He was still working on his dedicatory sermon, scheduled for 2 days later. That evening, the flue casings caught fire. The blaze spread rapidly out of control. Lifeboats were crushed or swamped by inexpert and hasty handling. The icy waters claimed all those aboard but 6. Fallen was not among the lucky few. His trunk later was washed ashore, where it was later found and ransacked of everything but his papers. The dedication of the East Lexington Church went forward with the sorrow of the tragedy overshadowing the joy of the occasion. Appropriately designated the Fallen, F-O-L-L-E-N, Church, the building still stands. Eliza Fallen recovered from her illness and picked up and carried her husband's fallen torch. That's F-A-L-L-E-N. I'm sorry, I read what I get. She wrote a number of books on Unitarian and abolitionist themes and became a famous writer of children's stories that you've all read. 3 Little Kittens. One of the pew holders in Fallen's former New York church was a struggling young artist and lithographer by the name of Nathaniel B. Currier. When news of the accident arrived, Currier rushed to his workshop with an idea. 3 days later, the New York Sun published his sensational lithograph of the scene along with his up-to-date report. In spite of mistakenly listing Eliza Fallen among those that perished, his illustrated scoop made Currier's reputation and career. 10 years later, in 1850, he founded the firm of Currier and Ives. And ever since, the lithographs have been household adornments to American culture. Currier contributed heavily from the profits to his church and served for many years on its board of trustees. Their lives and their fates were linked, and they are linked to us. You don't know where we're going until you have that sheet. I mean, goodness. It always amazes me what direction my sermons take between the time I come up with the title, which is usually several weeks before I actually put the sermon together, and when I get around to writing the sermon. When this one started out, I was thinking of a couple of our spiritual forebears that run counter to our current Unitarian Universalist thinking these days. A couple who are kind of embarrassing to us these days. All denominations have them. For me, the best example is Jim Jones of the Disciples of Christ, though he's not very well known anymore. No, I'm not going to add anything to that. I'm sorry. You're a bad example to me. You know that, Charlie? But the more I prepared, the more I became aware of another way of looking at this title of mine. There are many Unitarians or Universalists or Unitarian Universalists we don't talk about simply because we don't know about them. Many of them are on my t-shirt, and you can, after the service, if you have good eyesight, you can read them. We know many of our heroes and heroines. Their names alone are enough to fill us with pride as we recall what made them famous and that they are part of us. Like Susan B. Anthony and Clara Barton and John Quincy Adams and their equally famous wives Abigail and Louisa. Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau and Joseph Priestley and Thomas Jefferson, though not Jefferson so much anymore. But there are many more Unitarians or Universalists or Unitarian Universalists we don't know or don't know they are part of us, part of our forebears, like the Fallons and Nathaniel Currier. There are many more well-known people who are also our forebears. For instance, did you know that Edvard Grieg is both a famous Norwegian composer and pianist, but also was a Unitarian? Béla Bartók was a Hungarian Unitarian, a musician and a composer, who almost single-handedly recorded, transcribed, analyzed, and most probably saved Eastern European folk music when it was being diluted by more modern music. We know the name of Alexander Graham Bell, although he never joined one of our churches. He called himself a Unitarian. Dorothea Dix, the great prison reformer, was a Unitarian. You may not know the connection to Albert Schweitzer. For years, he was a member of our Church of the Larger Fellowship for people who live too far away from a Unitarian or Universalist church. There weren't very many UU churches in Africa in those days. There still aren't. In October of 1945, our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee actually saved his hospital with their timely financial support. Everybody knows Charles Dickens was an English Unitarian. It said that A Christmas Carol is a statement of Unitarian faith. You know the name of Frank Lloyd Wright, famous architect, son of a Unitarian minister, and he was the architect for several of our churches. He was a member of our churches in Chicago and Madison, Wisconsin. By the way, did you know that Wright's son, John, created Lincoln Logs? How many of you played with Lincoln Logs? Yeah, okay. Speaking of architects, Charles Bulfinch, the architect of the U.S. Capitol, was also a Unitarian. Beatrix Potter, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter, well, she created them, was a Unitarian too. Then there's Whitney Young of the Urban League, civil rights activist and social worker, a member of several of our churches. Linus Pauling, winner of both the Nobel Prize for Chemistry and the Nobel Peace Prize, was a member of the first Unitarian Church of Los Angeles. Fanny Farmer, you probably got her cookbook and yeah, okay. Known for her cookies, or candies rather, and her cookbook. She was a Unitarian, but perhaps the thing that she is remembered for most, she's the inventor of the standard cooking measurements. How many of you know the name Irma Rombauer? Okay, a few. She wrote The Joy of Cooking in 1931 as a fundraiser for her church, the First Unitarian Church of St. Louis. There are more we could mention. Poets, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Robert Burns, I try to pronounce it correctly, E. Cummings, with, of course, no capitals, Carl Sandburg, May Sarton, other writers like Ray Bradbury, Margaret Fuller, Bret Harte, Herman Melville, Mary Shelley, and Kurt Vonnegut. Theologians like Charles Hartshorne, Henry Nelson Wyman, Roy Morrison. I had the privilege of presiding at his memorial service in the D.C. area. And James Luther Adams, lots of other musicians, Malvina Reynolds, Pete Seeger, Julia Ward Howe, and Robert Shaw. And then there's John Molson, who, with his 3 sons, founded the Unitarian churches in Montreal and Toronto. And I think they still brew some pretty good beer. Those who know beer know Molson, never mind. And then we have our own Jim Joneses. Fortunately, most of them have been forgotten, perhaps because they came down on the wrong side of recognized Unitarian or Universalist stands. For instance, we don't know who the slavery defenders were, but we know there were some, even in Boston, where William Ellery Channing, one of maybe the definer of Unitarian theology in the early 1800s, was forced to leave his church by them for his rhetoric. We know there were some anti-women suffragist advocates, but they were found in both Unitarian and Universalist churches. The list of lost souls could go on, but I want to mention 7 of our forebears that we do know about and are embarrassed by today. You've got the sheets. Their pictures are all on this green paper. I guess that's green. if you haven't done so and want to as we go along, you can try to, from my description, figure out which one is which. And I'll tell you after each one. Anyway, the first on my list is P.T. Barnum, the great humbug himself. Barnum was a universalist who may or may not have said, "There's a sucker born every minute." We do know that he owned or claimed to own one slave in New York, a woman who was supposed to be 161 years old and a former nurse of George Washington. Actually, I suppose he wasn't all that bad. He published the Herald of Freedom, a Universalist newspaper which was very anti-Calvinist. And he gave Jumbo the elephant, after Jumbo died and was stuffed, to Tufts University. And, of course, the building to go around him. Tufts was a Universalist university. Fortunately, or unfortunately, the building burned with Jumbo inside it. But it was rebuilt, and there is a small bronze statue of Jumbo in the rebuilt building. But it's his final humbug that I was intrigued by. It involved Universalist Horace Greeley, who was the publisher of the New York Herald. The two were friends, and Greeley agreed to publish Barnum's obituary before he died. So Barnum was to get word when he's, it's almost, and sent word, and it was published, and Barnum lived 2 more weeks. I guess Barnum wasn't that bad, but we don't often add him to the list of our heroes. And that's his picture in D, if you haven't figured that one out. D. I think that's right. Is that up there? Well, there he is right there. The same thing goes for Horatio Alger, author of dozens of books about going from rags to riches, which he himself had. Some say he only wrote 1 book and just re-edited every other version. Many of us can do that with sermons. He became a Unitarian minister. Alger was a thoroughgoing materialist who measured success strictly in material terms. If he was still around today, he would probably still be a marketplace economist and maybe in somebody's cabinet. So Horatio Alger wouldn't make our top 100 heroes list either. E is his. There he is. Next, there is Millard Fillmore, 13th president of these United States, 1850 to 1852. Trivial Pursuit is about the only place besides late night TV where you hear the name of Millard Fillmore. He was born in a log cabin and was self-educated and became president by accident when Zachary Taylor died in office. Fillmore was not re-elected at the end of his short term for pretty good reasons. He was a Unitarian, and as the United States president, supported the fugitive slave law, which required the return of escaped slaves back, which even then didn't make him very popular with his fellow Unitarians or Universalists. It's interesting that his name has been perverted into Mallard Fillmore, a duck in a very conservative comic strip. That alone would keep him off many of our lists. Thank you. That's one you didn't get. Mallard Fillmore as A on the list. The same could be said of Marion Barry, former mayor of Washington, D.C. Prior to his drug conviction, he was an active participant in our All Souls Unitarian Church in Washington. After that conviction, he, as he said, got religion and went back to his Baptist roots. And we stopped talking about him. And we still don't. That's his picture at B. The same is true of Senator Bob Packwood, He doesn't, never mind. Who was expelled from the Senate for ethics violations. We used to brag about him being one of us. We don't anymore. His picture is F. The last name on my list is George Pullman, the creator of the Pullman train cars that many of us have ridden on. Maybe he comes closest to our being our Jim Jones. According to George Hudson Williams' History of American Universalism, Pullman represented one whole side of universalism at the time as they looked at labor relations. They were those who advanced the practice of industrial paternalism, believing it was the Christian duty of industrialists to take care of their workers. But that was only one side. The Reverend Levi Powers, the leading Universalist advocate of greater economic equality through a moderate socialism, in a sermon just the day before the strike began in 1894, he stated, and I'll quote Williams again, "When you permit one man to possess 100 millions of wealth, as several men in this country do, you give into their care and merciful, or rather merciless, keeping just 75,000 slaves, with this disadvantage, that the slaves of today are mocked with a seeming freedom which they do not have. And the man who owns them doesn't know he owns them, and so feels no responsibility to keep them from starvation or care for them in sickness." Perhaps there's some reminder of that in current days. Anyway, going beyond condemnation of greed, Powers pointed out some of the inherent difficulties of industrial paternalism, of which George Pullman, founder of the Pullman Palace Car Company, was a leading advocate. The company town of Pullman, Illinois, now part of Chicago, was founded as an experiment in paternalistic industrial order and community planning. The infamous strike came about when, under the deflationary pressure of the Panic of 1893, Pullman reduced his employees' wages by 25%, while maintaining the rents for their homes and for their churches at the same level, and then refused to recognize collective bargaining or even arbitration. The Pullman family was a prominent one in Universalist circles. Two of his brothers were Universalist ministers, as were several other relatives. One of them, Charles Eaton, of the Church of the Divine Paternity, that was its real name, in New York City, along with the Christian Leader, the leading Universalist publication of the day, spoke out in support of Pullman. The reaction of other Universalist publications and many other ministers was exactly the opposite, taking a much more pro-labor stance. So now you know why we don't often brag about George Pullman as one of our forebears. His picture is C, which I'm sure you figured out because it was the last one. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make in all of this is that the Unitarian Universalist movement and the separate movements of the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century that we know as Unitarian Universalist are not and never were singular. We are truly a pluralistic church and strive to be. Throughout our history, as a free religion, our men and women have been on both sides of most issues, or maybe I should say, on every side of every issue. We tend to forget that fact sometimes and think that all Unitarian Universalists are liberal religious humanists, forgetting that we are also UU Christians and UU theists and UU pagans and UU Buddhists and more. And we think that we're all Democrats, forgetting that we are also Republicans and anywhere in between, and that some of our forebears were prominent Republicans, like William Howard Taft, 27th President of the United States and our 10th Chief Justice, who was at one time had been president of the American Unitarian Association. Another famous Republican was Robert Walsh. Anybody know that name? The founder of the John Birch Society. You mumble, mumble, mumble. Anyone who has ever gone to a Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly, or even a district meeting when business is being conducted and voting on important issues were being dealt with, learns very quickly that Unitarian Universalists are not all alike. Even though we share a compassion for folks who are oppressed or displaced or in great need, we have differing opinions about how to go about it, how to react to it. We are a living example of pluralism, and we need to live that pluralism by being open to people different from what we think of as the norm. We need to exercise what many people are calling radical hospitality. Not only do we need to welcome folks who think and act like us, but also those who challenge us. I'm not talking about those whose presence or behavior put us or our children or our community at risk. I'm talking about those who challenge us to think more deeply, those who challenge us to act more justly, those who challenge us to question our assumptions and our conclusions and even our personal beliefs. For who is to say who will be the heroes of future generations? whether you are the ones that our descendants will talk about or not. Remember, we will all be someone's forebears. So may it be, blessed be, and amen.
I see a person in the audience who wants to come up to the front and tell us why he pledges. And here he comes.
He looks familiar.
The magic mic.
Thank you very much. One of the reasons that I pledged to the church is because of you all. Our group, the Finance Committee and the Stewardship Committee, has worked diligently to get the pledge drive completed. It is not completed. Several of you still haven't gotten in your pledges. Your excuse has been that I didn't send you a card. Well, I did. It's in the mail or you have it already. But we feel good. We feel enough confidence in you that we've recommended to the board, and the board is going to recommend to the congregation a very aggressive budget for the next year. And I'm very grateful to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'm reminded as we do the sharing of gifts of my connection with the people that Rod was talking about, particularly P.T. Barnum, but also Millard Fillmore, because we share a birthday. I was born on January 7th, so was Millard Fillmore. And when I celebrate my birthday, I always hoist a glass to Millard because he is one of those forgotten presidents. In fact, when I mention that I share a birthday with a president, people look at me oddly, like, who? All right. My favorite P.T. Barnum story, though, which I'll tell you briefly, is the one that he used at his famous museum on Fifth Avenue. He had a sign when you entered, it said, "This way to the egress." And of course, most people didn't know what that was, so they followed the signs, and they would lead them down a corridor and then out the door to the outside. That was the egress. Clever fellow. Then they had to pay to get back in. You don't have to pay to get in here, though, very nice thing about it. But the operation and the outreach of our church is important, and your input and contributions are very important, and it's a perfect time to think about what you can give back. Before we do, though, before we have the collection, though, we want to remind you that we also contribute to organizations identified by the Social Justice Committee, particularly with our Change for Change program. And this quarter's recipient for Change donations is the Mesilla Valley Hospice. You can give to them by putting your change in the basket or by writing Change for Change on the note line of your check. Please give generously.
Our closing hymn is 298, if you've got a book. Wake Now My Senses. The words were written by Thomas Mickelson, who is a Unitarian musician. The music is an old Irish melody for those who have Irish roots. If you'll stand as you're willing and able, we'll sing Wake Now My Senses. Be seated. Now, as we travel back home upon those highways, city streets, and country roads, to live our separate lives and create our separate histories, remember that we have shared this common moment together. So may it be. Blessed be, and amen.
Would you please join us in reciting the words as we extinguish the flame?